When you can't see the way, trust His grace. Emma had heard that phrase so many times in sermons, devotionals, and quiet conversations with her grandmother. It sounded beautiful, poetic even, the kind of sentence people stitched onto pillows and hung in frames in cozy living rooms. But beauty was easy when life was calm. Beauty was effortless when the path was clear. Trust sounded holy when tomorrow made sense. It was harder now, when she was standing in the deepest valley she had ever known, unsure of where her next step would land. The morning sunlight drifted through the curtains of her small apartment, but she barely noticed it. Her eyes were fixed on the stack of bills on the table, the letter from the company announcing her layoff, and the voicemail from her landlord asking when she would pay rent. Her chest tightened again, that familiar pressure, like invisible hands slowly closing around her ribcage. She ran her fingers through her hair and exhaled shakily. "God," she whispered, barely loud enough for herself to hear. "I don't know what to do. I don't see anything ahead. I don't have a plan. I'm scared." Silence answered her. Or at least that's how it felt. She closed her eyes and waited. Nothing. No sudden warmth. No whisper in her heart. No miraculous peace flooding her spirit. Just quiet, heavy, and almost suffocating. She stood up restlessly, pacing the living room, brushing crumbs off the couch arm from a dinner she barely remembered eating the night before. She used to pray with fire in her voice, confident, joyful, believing. Now her prayers felt like fragile sighs floating upward into an endless sky. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't need to look to know it wasn't good news. Lately every message felt like another wave crashing against her already shaking spirit. She ignored it and walked toward the window, watching cars move on the street below. People rushing, laughing, living, moving like they belonged here, like the world still made sense for them. "What am I even doing?" she whispered, voice trembling. "Where am I supposed to go from here? Why can't I hear you right now?" Tears stung her eyes. She blinked them back, but they fell anyway, sliding down silently. She wasn't angry at God. She wasn't doubting Him. But she was tired, bone, deep tired, the kind of tired that prayers alone seemed unable to soothe. A knock at the door startled her. She wiped her eyes quickly and opened it. There stood Mrs. Carter, her elderly neighbor, gray-haired, gentle-eyed, wearing a cardigan like always. She held a small plate covered with foil. "I made cinnamon rolls." She smiled softly. "Thought you might want one." Emma forced a tiny smile. "Thank you, that's very kind." Mrs. Carter didn't leave. She studied Emma carefully, as if she could see the storm swirling inside her. "You haven't been yourself lately." Emma looked away. "Just a lot going on." "I know," the older woman replied quietly, surprising her. "And I also know you've been praying. Sometimes we pray and feel nothing. Sometimes God feels quiet, but silence doesn't mean absence." The words pierced Emma's heart. "Come sit with me," Mrs. Carter said gently. Not a command, an invitation. Emma hesitated, but something inside nudged her forward. They sat on the worn sofa, and the older woman spoke softly. "When I lost my husband," she began, "I begged God to tell me what to do. I wanted direction, answers, something clear and loud. But all I heard for weeks was quiet. I thought He left me to figure it out alone." She paused, smiling faintly, but He hadn't. He was holding me even when I felt like I was falling. Emma swallowed hard. "How did you get through it, Grace?" she whispered, not understanding, not certainty, just grace. And grace doesn't always lead us where we expect, but it always leads us where we need. They sat in silence, but this silence felt different, not hollow, not frightening, soft, a presence within the quiet, not an emptiness. Mrs. Carter gently squeezed her hand. "You don't need to see the way He sees it. That's enough." After she left, Emma stared at the cinnamon roll on her plate. Sweet cinnamon, warm bread, icing melting along the edges, such a small thing, yet somehow it felt like hope. A reminder that she wasn't forgotten. Maybe grace didn't always roar. Maybe sometimes it whispered through kind neighbors and warm pastries on hard mornings. She breathed slowly, feeling the air fill her lungs more deeply than before. Okay, God, maybe I don't need to understand right now. Just help me walk this. The day passed slower than usual. She applied for jobs, sent emails, updated her resume, small acts that felt like planting seeds in dry soil. Nothing changed instantly, but for the first time in weeks, her heart didn't feel like it was cracking open. That night she sat on her bed staring at the ceiling. I still don't see where I'm going, she murmured. But I trust you're here. And there, in that vulnerable whisper, something shifted. Not a miracle, not a sudden breakthrough, but a subtle peace. Gentle, like soft rain on parched ground. She closed her eyes and rested, not because everything was fixed, but because she no longer felt alone in the waiting. The next morning, Emma woke up before her alarm. The world outside was still dim, the sky brushed with pale early light. She felt a tug in her heart, not a voice, not a command, but a quiet pull. Go outside. She slipped on a hoodie and stepped out into the chilly morning air. The street was quiet, the world still waking. She walked to the small park across the block, where dew glistened on the grass and birds sang their fragile dawn songs. She sat on a bench, pulling her knees close, breathing the cold air deeply, and then it happened. Not a voice, not a thunderous divine revelation, just a presence, tangible and soft, like arms around her soul, like warmth blooming inside her chest. It felt like peace, quiet, steady peace, the kind that doesn't erase problems, but steadies you enough to face them. Tears slipped down her cheeks again, but this time they weren't desperate. They were relief. Gratitude. She didn't see the future yet, but she felt him. That was enough. Minutes passed, or maybe it was longer. Time felt suspended. And then, gently, she whispered what her heart finally understood. Your grace is enough, even when I can't see the way. When she returned home, her phone buzzed again, this time, an email notification. She clicked lazily, expecting another decline. But her breath caught. We are pleased to inform you. She read it again, hands trembling. A job offer. Remote work, good pay, a start date next month. She sank onto the couch, overwhelmed, not because this solved everything instantly, but because it felt like confirmation. Like a small, divine whisper. See, I was working all along. Her heart swelled. But even as she celebrated, she realized something profound. The peace she felt in the park had already filled her before this blessing arrived. She hadn't needed proof, she had needed presence, and she had found it not through answers but through trust. Days turned into weeks, and life slowly stabilized. She worked, prayed, laughed again, breathed easier. But she never forgot the valley, or the quiet grace that carried her through it. Sometimes, she still looked back at that morning, remembering the stillness, the way peace settled on her like gentle light. And she would whisper again, whenever life felt uncertain, even when I can't see the way, I trust your grace. Because she understood now, faith isn't always about knowing the destination. Sometimes faith is simply trusting the one who walks beside you in the dark, steadying your steps until morning breaks. And grace, quiet, constant, unwavering grace, is often the light guiding you long before you ever see the path. Not by sight, not by certainty, but by trust, and that was enough, always had been, always would be.